world, YouTube world in general. Thank you so much for being here today. You have stumbled yet again into my corner, Kari's corner. I am so happy that you're here today. I'm so excited that you're here today because today we have a really special guest and I cannot wait to bring him in. I am super pumped about today's show. If you can't tell, I am very excited. Today's guest is from the OET. And if you stay tuned and you pay attention, good morning. Make sure you drop in the chat who you are. Look at that. We already got my Tanzania. You know the drill. My people, my homies know the drill. Drop in who you are, where you're from, where you're tuning in from. Today, I'm going to ask you to give a little bit more information. I need you to tell me if you're an RN or a nurse aide. Hello in the United Kingdom. Tell me if you're an RN or a nurse aide. And can you also mention your case manager? If you're already with Worldwide, tell me who your case manager is, because I say that because we are doing some amazing OET giveaways. I'm not telling you what it is, not saying it yet, not putting it out there, but we are doing some really awesome, amazing OET giveaways. So stay tuned, pay attention to the end of the show after my absolutely stellar guest speaker does his presentation and talks about all things OET. I am so excited for these giveaways. Just a little bit of background. Look at that, Tracy with the little drop-in bottom third thing. Tracy, you are just always on it. Just a little bit of information about the OET before we get started. Laura Levis is your case manager. You are in such great hands. I love Laura. And Vanessa, oh my gosh, Vanessa makes my day. Shout out to Vanessa. She's fantastic. So a little bit about the OET so we can go ahead and get things started. Cameroon. Oh, that's exciting. The OET has the main 4 sections that every test has. You have listening, you have reading, you have writing, and you have speaking. But my favorite thing about the OET, and the reason I am such a big fan of the OET, is because it is specifically designed for healthcare workers. So you're not going to have a section of your test that asks you to read an article about archaeology and then discuss bones and dead bodies. You're going to have healthcare relevant information on this test. And that is why I am such a huge fan. A lot of candidates have said that it's easier to prepare for the OET just because it's information you're interested in. It's information you know about. So the OET, like I said, has a listening, a reading, a writing, and a speaking subtest. The listening test is 40 minutes long. The reading test is 60 minutes long. The writing test, you get 45 minutes. And then finally, the speaking test, which their speaking test is my absolute favorite. It's always done with a person, and it's a role play where you are the healthcare provider, which you are conveniently, and the person you're speaking to is either a patient, a family member, a lot of different role plays. So they're really creative in that portion of the exam. And I absolutely love that portion of the exam. So over a real quick final note on the overview, if you go to their website, it'll say it's 455. I just learned this morning. It'll say it's 455 US dollars, but 587 Australian dollars, which is actually, because most of you are going to be registering for the OET not in the US, right? You're not going to be in the US taking the OET. You're in your country taking the OET. So that is actually the equivalent of 390 US dollars, which it's a substantial difference. So if you're doing any kind of conversion to see how much it costs for you, use the 587 Australian dollar amount to calculate the currency wherever you are, wherever it is you are paying. Okay, so I am going to invite my guest in. His name is Jack. He works directly with the OET, and he is super knowledgeable and has a really great presentation for you guys today. So, hey, Jack, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you. I hear you perfectly.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that great overview about the test. I'm really excited to kind of dig into some of the details here and to give you guys some tips and tricks that you can use to prepare for the OET test as well.
Yeah, guys, I took a quick glance at Jack's presentation that he's doing today, and he really has a lot of the tips and tricks. I like to say this for all of my presenters, but a lot of the tips and tricks he provides are, yes, absolutely specific to the OET. Look, Prince already says they hear you perfectly. But all of these tips are great for practicing English. You got to practice English. So these are great tips no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're practicing. So Jack, let's get started with your presentation and tell us all about the OET.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks again for the intro. So again, my name is Jack Waas. I'm the U.S. Education Specialist with OET. So again, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the different sections of the OET test and also giving you guys some tips and tricks, and also elaborating a little bit more on what Kari said at the beginning, that OET is the only English language exam designed specifically for healthcare professionals. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means on the next slide. Okay, so what do I mean when I say it's designed specifically for healthcare professionals? So for the first thing to note here, that was developed in consultation with subject matter experts, meaning that the content is relevant and specific to you in a healthcare context, right? These are scenarios that you might be familiar with as a healthcare professional. There's not any really general English assessment that you might have to do, kind of like Kari was saying, where you have to read an article about geology or anthropology or something like that. These are more relevant and specific to you in a healthcare context. The test materials were also designed to replicate the language skills required to deliver patient safety and quality care, and candidates learn the type of language that they'll need at work. All this is to say that preparing for and taking the OET test will help you to develop skills that you need on the job as a healthcare professional in an English-speaking country. All right, so to talk a little bit more about what I mean when I say a healthcare specific test, I have two examples here that kind of illustrate the point for you. So for the first one, the writing portion of the test, right? In a general or academic English test, you might be asked to write an essay on a general topic, for example. On the OET writing section, you're writing a healthcare letter, typically a referral letter or a discharge summary based on case notes. So this is something that will be testing your writing abilities in English, but again, in a more applicable and familiar scenario to you as a healthcare professional. The second example here would be the speaking section of the test, right? So typically in a general or academic English test, you might be asked to participate in a structured interview on a general topic, right? Archaeology, geology, any random topic relating to an English skill that you need to develop. But on OET, you're going to be asked to take the role of a healthcare professional in a role play with a patient, right? So these are the types of conversations that you might be having on a daily basis with patients. So again, you'll feel more confident and comfortable when you're taking this part of the test.
Is there any kind of like extended speaking portion? I know like IELTS has where they kind of give you a cue card and it can be about cell phones or technology, anything can be on that cue card. Is there any time where they have to speak solely for like, there's a timer and it's 2 minutes, or is it just basically the general flow of conversation?
Just the general flow of conversation. So there's a little bit of like a warm up at the beginning of the speaking, but that part's not actually assessed. The actual part that's being assessed is just these two role plays.
Oh, I love that you give a warm up, because that allows our candidates to like get comfortable with who's examining them and all that kind of stuff. That is absolutely fantastic. That's huge.
Yes. Okay, so now let's get into the specific sections of the OET test. So the first one you can see here is the listening portion, and it's made up of 3 parts. And as Kari said at the beginning, takes a total of 40 minutes. So the first part here, you'll be listening to 2 separate consultations between a healthcare professional and a patient. And what you have to do is complete the case notes in this audio that you're hearing. So the image you can see on the screen here is actually a sample from part A of the listening test. So you can see the gaps or the blanks where you have to fill in the conversation based on this dialogue that you hear. And again, this is something that you are very familiar with as a healthcare professional. You don't need to change any of the information that you're hearing. You're just writing exactly what you hear to complete the gaps or the blanks in this conversation. And there's 2 audios that you'll be hearing and 12 questions per audio. So that's part A. Part B is 6 short dialogues or monologues in a workplace setting. So these are the types of conversations that healthcare professionals have with a colleague, right? So maybe a handover of a patient, a team briefing, or feedback to a healthcare professional from a mentor, for example. Those are the types of the dialogues or monologues you'll be listening to. And there's 1 multiple choice question for each of those 6 dialogues you'll be hearing. And then the third part here, part C, these are 2 longer presentations or interviews with healthcare professionals. And this is kind of something that you might hear in a professional development context, right? So you might be listening to a presenter talk about the type of work that they do in a specific healthcare field, or maybe developments in the treatment of a condition or something of that nature. And again, these are 2 longer audios, and you'll have to listen to answer 6 questions for each of those 2 audios. All right, so now let's get into some tips for the listening section. So the first one is to know the test format, right? Know what to expect the day of the test, know how to record answers for the different parts of the test. And you can do this by going to our website, oet.com. We have a lot of official sample tests available there. We have a wealth of resources that you can use to kind of familiarize yourself with the test. And just as a reminder, we have both a paper-based and a computer-based test available. So make sure that the resources that you are looking at relate to the specific type of test that you are planning to take on the test day. The next tip here is move forward even if you miss a question, right? If you don't understand a part of the audio, keep going so you don't miss out on any of the other questions. And then if you have time at the end, you can kind of come back and revisit those gaps or those blanks that you might have, right? These audios, people are speaking at a natural speed in the audio, so it's easy to kind of miss something, but make sure that you are continuing and filling in all the answers as you hear them so that you're not missing out on any opportunities to answer questions.
So in the scoring of this, because I know different tests scored different ways, right? In the scoring of this, are they counted? Do they lose points if they don't answer a question?
They're not losing points if they don't answer a question. No. Mm-mm.
Okay, so if they miss something and they leave it blank, they don't need to worry about necessarily losing points. But if they answer it and get it wrong, do they lose points then?
Yes, they're losing points if they get it wrong. And I'll have to confirm exactly how the scoring on this portion works. But I know that you don't. But I know, to answer your first question, that you don't get penalized for leaving an answer blank, right? So it's better to kind of leave one blank and continue and follow the flow of the conversation and answer those ones correctly than to worry about completing a line just because you might lose points for a blank answer.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Because like I said, some tests, it penalizes you if you leave it blank.
Mm-hmm.
So on this test, on the OET, it's just better to leave it blank and move on.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Perfect.
So the next tip, sorry, if we can go back.
I skipped a tip. That's me.
No, you're fine. The last 2 tips here. So for part A, of the listening section, you are given 60 seconds before the audio starts to play. So during that time, make sure to read the case notes that you have, and also kind of look at where the gaps in the conversation are. And based on what comes before and after the gap, you can kind of try to guess or predict what type of information you'll be listening for, right? Are you listening for a symptom, a body part, the patient's occupation? Like, what type of information is around the gap, which will give you an idea of what type of information you'll be listening for. And the last tip here for part B and C, focus on the meaning, not the words, right? So these parts are really checking your understanding of the outcomes of a conversation, or the opinions or attitude of the speaker, right? So you don't have to necessarily focus on a series of words or phrases that you hear. Rather, focus on the speaker's intended meaning to be able to answer these questions.
So we have a really good question from Prince Muha. He asks, how about spelling mistakes? How important is spelling on the OET?
That is a really good question. And I know that there is a part of the exam where they do take into consideration your spelling, and there's a part where they basically recognize any attempt at spelling the word as correct. So I will have to get back to you on which specific sections those are, but that's a really good question. I know at one part of the exam, it's taken into consideration a little bit more, and in the other part, they're just looking for any attempt at finding the missing information. So I will write that down and get back to you with the specific sections for each.
Awesome. Yes, everyone keep those. We will answer those questions live and direct right here. So if you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Throw them out there.
Okay, so moving on to the reading section. This is also in 3 parts and takes a total of 60 minutes. So part A is an expeditious or a fast reading task, right? And this is completed in 15 minutes and is designed to replicate the workplace where you don't always have the luxury of time to consider information or check the meanings of words, right? Sometimes you have to read information really fast and make a decision or understand information based on that reading. For this section, make sure to use your skimming and your scanning abilities to kind of quickly find information in the text. You'll be presented with 4 different texts that you have to read, and then there are 20 questions based on those 4 texts. For the second part here, there are 6 short workplace extracts. So these short texts are typical of those sent as an email or a memo in a workplace setting, or may be found on the notice board in your staff room, something like a policy update or machine operating instructions or something of that nature. And there'll be 1 multiple choice question for each of those short extracts here. So for example, you can see on the screen here on the slide, this is an example of one of the extracts that you'll have and the multiple choice question related to it. You can see that here. And then part C, which is similar to the listening section. These are a little bit longer passages, and they're kind of typical of professional development content of general interest to all healthcare professionals. So a little bit longer of a reading, and then you'll have some questions to answer about that as well. All right, getting to our tips here. So the first one for part A, make sure to answer the questions in order, right? So when you get to the questions for part A, at the beginning, you'll find a series of matching questions, and these are designed to help you orientate yourself to the different texts and the contents of those texts. So if you do this matching section first, it will make it easier to find the answers to the remaining questions because you have an idea of what each of the different texts is about. So make sure to do that first to kind of give you a leg up to answer the other questions. Next tip here is this is kind of a general tip for all multiple choice questions, right? A good strategy is sometimes to read the question, the multiple choice question first, and then before looking at the answers, try to think of what the answer might be from your understanding of the question, or even go back into the text directly and try to find the answer. And then you can read the answer options available to you, right? Sometimes if you read the answer options first, you might get distracted, or you might think that a correct answer, if you see a keyword that matches with the question above, you might get tricked and think that that is the correct answer. It's always a good idea to try to find the answer first and then go back and read the answer options available to you. Next tip here is to build stamina and flexibility, right? So as we're talking about, there's a lot, the OET test is long. There's a lot of different sections, just like every other English language test out there. So in order to train for this, a good idea is to maybe try to do 1 hour of reading, 40 minutes of listening, maybe a podcast or a YouTube video, and then 45 minutes of writing to kind of prepare yourself and prepare your mind to be able to do those tasks. It's also a good idea to try to do it once a week. Try to do all 3 of those things back to back. So you're really preparing yourself. You're really increasing your stamina and your endurance to be able to take this test, because you wouldn't want to, getting tired or getting, a little exhausted your exam day to be the reason that you get a lower score, right? If you're trained and you're prepared for this, that will not be the reason that your score is affected or lowered. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And the last thing here is just to practice first without a timer, right? So don't overcomplicate things when you're starting to starting to prep for OET, give your brain space to work out how the test works and get familiar with the types of questions. And then you can worry about timing yourself to make sure that you're able to complete tasks in the allotted time on the test.
Yeah, the OET, I always preach this no matter what test you're getting ready to take, is take practice exams.
Yes.
Take those practice exams. And the OET actually has, it's called the OET Pulse. And it's going to tell you where you are. It will tell you whether or not you're ready to take this test. You know, it's going to give you your scores. It's going to give you that direct feedback. So I'm excited to talk about the OET Pulse a little bit later on, but I just really, really, really want to emphasize what Jack said, and that taking those practice tests, that's what's really, really, really going to help you.
Absolutely. Yes. You don't want to go into something like this unprepared, and use the resources available to you to be as prepared as you can. Okay, moving on to writing. So one thing to note here is that the listening and reading portion of the OET test are the same for everyone that's taking the test, right? These are general healthcare topics, whereas the writing and the speaking are something that would be even more familiar to you. They're profession specific. So for example, a nurse that is taking the OET test would be presented with a nursing specific writing and reading writing and speaking task, rather. So these are things that are even more specific and relatable to you in a professional context. And what the writing section is you have to write a kind of a professional letter. And typically this takes the form of a referral letter. And you have time to kind of read the patient's case history, which is something very familiar to you, right? And at the end of the case notes is the writing task, containing details of who you need to write the letter to and why. And as you can see here, you have 5 minutes to kind of familiarize yourself with these case notes and look at the instructions. And then you have 40 minutes to actually complete the writing task based on the information that you are provided. And one thing to keep in mind here is that depending on what type of letter and depending on the instructions that you are presented with, you might not need to include everything from the case notes in that letter, right? You really have to look at the information, determine what's important to communicate to your reader, and that's what you'll be including in the letter that you're writing.
So I assume in like the scoring of this, like obviously grammar is important because that's part of appearing as a professional, right? So grammar, spelling, all of those things are going to be important.
Mm-hmm.
But how, when they're looking at scoring this, you know, like, is it more important to get the meaning across, and all that kind of thing? Or how important is grammar and spelling to the writing and the scoring of this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, as you said, it is important, but I think, right on par with the grammar and spelling is the type of information you're including, making sure that you're keeping the reader in mind, making sure that things are organized in a way that is logical and makes sense to the reader. So yeah, I think that's good to point out that there's a lot of different factors being taken into consideration here. It's not only the grammar or spelling. You really have to kind of prioritize the specific information that will be important to the reader and keep that in mind when writing the letter.
Awesome. We have another question that says, what happens if they're taking the computer-based test and there is a network issue? Because we have, like I said, we've got nurses from all over the world, and internet stability is not a guaranteed factor. So what happens if there is a network issue while they're taking the test?
That's a really good question. So typically for the computer-based test, that is taken at a test venue. So someone at the test venue, we kind of have a testing provider that would be able to assist you in the case of a network issue. But luckily that's typically not the case, right? These testing venues are vetted, and we try to ensure as much as possible that there will be reliable internet connectivity at the venue. But that's something that you can work with our venue provider at the testing center directly.
Awesome. Good to know, because you hate to pay all that money and then internet times out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of some of the tips for the writing section, so the first one is to practice your test type, right? So I was just talking about how there's the paper-based version and the computer-based version. So when you're writing these letters, make sure to practice in the way that you will be writing the letter on the test day, right? So if it's a paper-based version, you're going to be writing out those practice letters. And if it's the computer-based version, you should practice typing them out. So that doesn't really affect you the day of. You're not worrying about typing or something like that. This is something that's already familiar to you, and it's something that you've practiced already. Next tip here is to practice all letter types. So for doctors and nurses, you'll be asked to write one of 3 letter types. So there's a referral letter, which is the most common, and I kind of talked about that already, a discharge letter, or a transfer letter. Those are kind of the 3 options. So make sure to practice all 3 of those. And like I said, on the website, you can find specific information about what the writing section will look like for the different professions. And you can find some prompts and practice available on our website. But the other thing to remember is that regardless of the letter type, your approach is the same for all 3, right? What information does the reader need to know, and how can this most clearly be communicated to the reader? The next tip here is to throw away your templates, right? So some people, when they're preparing for a test, they might try to memorize a specific format or memorize a specific template. The thing that's most important here is that the letter is very personalized to the specific context and the specific patient. So if you're worrying about memorizing a template, you might be focusing on that structure and ignoring some of the specific details that you need to make this a personalized letter. So instead, you should be focusing on those details rather than a specific template. And the last thing that I kind of already mentioned is to keep your reader in mind, right? This isn't a letter about what you find relevant or interesting. This is a letter telling the reader information that will be relevant to them, right? So this will help you decide which information to include or to omit based on the specifics of the case notes and the instructions provided.
Awesome. We have a couple of questions being thrown at you here.
Great.
One of them is other tests out there. For example, the IELTS has kind of multiple formats of their tests. You know, they have the IELTS academic, and then just different formats of the test. I know we spoke earlier, the OET actually has different formats of their test based on your healthcare profession. Can you speak to that a little bit? They ask, what are the formats of the OET, and who are they designed for? So when they register, how do they know which one to take?
That's a great question. Yes. As I was saying, so the listening and the reading are the same. Those formats are the same for all the different professions that are taking the OET test. And then the writing and the speaking, those are the sections that vary depending on the profession. So I believe there are 7 profession-specific tests available. I mean, on our website, there's more information about what those different ones are. There's definitely a nursing one. There's a medicine one. There is a pharmacy one. There's a veterinarian-specific test. So there's a lot of different options out there. It's very clearly, there shouldn't be a lot of confusion around which test might work best for you. It should be pretty straightforward based on the name of the test. But there is, more information on our websites listing all 7 of those profession-specific tests available.
Very good. And I did get one question about which states accept the OET. These are states that I'm going to give you a brief list real quick. These are the states that just outright on their website say, we accept the OET. It's listed in their legal information on their Board of Nursing website. You've got Florida, Washington, Oregon, Michigan, Arkansas, Massachusetts, Kentucky, Washington, D.C., and Colorado. But for states that simply require a visa screen or a CES, CILNI as acceptable English exams for the visa screen. So CGFNS, Joseph Silney, recognizes the OET as an acceptable test for your visa screen process, which everybody's got to have a visa screen. The only way you get out of taking an English test for the visa screen is if your education was completely 100% in English with English textbooks. I could do a whole show on how you get out of taking an English exam, but the OET is acknowledged by CGFNS and Joseph Silney. But there are specific states as well that acknowledge the OET. And I know I've spoken with quite a few people at the OET, and they're working hard to make that list longer of states and state boards that recognize the OET specifically as an accepted test. And remember, it always depends on whether or not you're applying for licensure through examination versus licensure through endorsement. If you already have a valid US license, you're applying for endorsement, and the requirements may be different than if you are applying for your initial licensure by examination. So any of those very specific questions, those need to be directed to your case manager. But that's kind of the best short and sweet summary I can do of where the OET is accepted. But thank you so much for asking that question, because I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be out there. So thank you for asking that question.
Thank you, Kari, for sharing that. Yes, it gets very tricky with the different state nursing boards. So there's a lot of information to keep track of there. So thank you for sharing that overview. All right, so let's move on to the last section, which is the speaking section of the test, right? And this is made up of 2 different role plays. One thing to note here is for the paper-based test, the speaking section rather, is done at the test venue the same day of the rest of the test. Whereas for the computer-based test, typically the speaking section is done in the candidate's home later that same day over Zoom, right? So there's still only one visit to the venue, but for the computer-based test, the speaking, I keep messing up my words here, the speaking section is done later that same day over Zoom. So that's why you can see that there's a difference in the time here. So the total time, it says 20 minutes, that's for the paper-based test, and then 30 minutes for the computer-based test, because there's kind of an ID check that happens at the beginning and a security check to kind of maintain the integrity of the exam. So that's why it says a little bit longer for the computer-based test. But the actual amount that you'll be speaking and what you'll be assessed on is the same amount. It just takes a little bit more preparation beforehand to check your ID and do the environment check before starting that section. And the speaking section are 2 role plays designed to give candidates the opportunity to demonstrate a range of English and the ability to speak to patients or their families on a variety of healthcare issues, right? So during the speaking section, you might have to use skills like explaining, reassuring, advising, persuading, responding, right? Those are some of the things that you have to do in these role plays. And as you can see here, you as the candidate will take the role of the healthcare professional, and there will also be another person that is part of this role play with you, the interlocutor, and they will take the role of the patient, or sometimes the family member of the patient. And the interlocutor is just there to help you facilitate the role play, right? This is not the person that is assessing you. So you don't have to feel, uncomfortable or nervous with this person. They're just there to help you do the role play. They have no say in how you'll be scored or how you'll be evaluated. And for these role plays, you have 3 minutes to prepare for each role play, and then the duration of the role play will be 5 minutes. So you're actually only being assessed on those 5 minutes of speaking for both of the role plays.
The reason I really love the speaking portion of this test, and it's my favorite of all the tests out there, I have no problem telling everyone this one's my favorite as far as the speaking test is concerned, is because with the other tests, you have someone who is examining you. You're talking to someone and they are judging you as you speak. Mm-hmm. And they oftentimes will give you what I like to call dead fish face. And they just stare at you like there's no response. There's no emotion, nothing. You could be sitting there telling the most wonderful story of your wedding day, and they just stare at you. So with this process, the other person is playing a role. So exactly. They're going to engage with you. It's going to feel like a natural conversation, which people do better when they feel a little more relaxed in this situation. So
absolutely.
For those of you out there who've taken an IELTS or even a PTE or a TOEFL, and speaking is just really stumping you, give OET a shot. If OET is accepted by your board of nursing, give OET a shot for that speaking portion, because you will feel you already know they're asking you about your profession. They're asking you about stuff that you are super knowledgeable about, and you are not going to have someone stare at you like a dead fish,
yes.
Which is fantastic. Again, we had a question about the cost. It's 587 Australian dollars. So do the conversion to wherever you are It's Adnilsor. I'm horrible at pronouncing your all's names. You all know this. But 587 Australian dollars. Do the conversion to your currency wherever you are. That's how best way I can answer how much the test costs.
Yes.
So keep on keeping on, Jack. This is great information.
All right, so let's move on to the tips now for the speaking section. Wonderful. So the first thing I mentioned earlier that you have 3 minutes to prepare kind of for the speaking section before the role play starts. So make sure to use those 3 minutes wisely, right? Maybe consider thinking about how you want to start the conversation and even writing that down so that when the role play starts, you have something to look at, you have something to kind of jog your memory, you know how to begin this conversation, and you won't be worried about trying to figure out where to start or how to begin. And then also think about what you need to explain to the patient and how you can do this without any technical terms that they might not understand, right? You're speaking to a patient, you really have to put things in lay terms in a way that will be understood by the general population. Second tip here is to get feedback on your speaking, right? So it can be very difficult for people to assess their own speaking abilities, right? Obviously, you want to assume that you have good speaking abilities, right? You want to think of yourself in a positive light. So it can be very hard to assess your own abilities, especially in speaking. So invest in feedback from a trained teacher. So you can find resources about some of the OET providers on our OET website, oet.com. And also, I'm sure you can connect with your case manager or with Kari for more information about those trained teachers that can assist you with your speaking as well. But it's always something to keep in mind. And the third part here is to give the patient time to respond, right? So these role plays are meant to be a real conversation between a healthcare professional and a patient. So make sure that you are not dominating the conversation, right? Instead, you should be engaging the interlocutor and replying based on the information that they're giving you, right? You should not be speaking the entire time as the candidate. It's a real conversation and there should be a flow and you should be engaging the interlocutor in this conversation. And the last thing here is to not focus too much on finishing the tasks, right? So you'll be given a cue card, as I said, that kind of tells you about what the scenario is and kind of some of the things that you need to mention in the role play. But don't worry about finishing all those tasks in the 5 minutes, right? You don't have to complete everything to get a high score. It's more important to be thorough when you're speaking and to include the interlocutor in the conversation. So that's kind of the priority here, is to really be thorough and have a real life exchange with this interlocutor.
I love this. So kind of in a way, the OET is assessing your bedside manner.
Yes.
And your ability to effectively communicate with a patient. How would you communicate with a patient? So yeah, unlike other speaking exams where it's kind of how much information and your grammatical structure and all those crazy things, this is how good are you at talking to patients?
Yes.
Which is fantastic. I just cannot sing those praises enough. I love to hear that.
Yeah, we call it kind of like clinical communication, right? So it's a lot more specific. It's not just your general speaking abilities, it's more your clinical communication in that context. Great. So those are the 4 sections of the test. So in summary, I kind of just want to close with sharing some reasons why people tend to choose OET. Why is this a good choice for you? When we know there's a lot of English tests on the market, so why choose OET? So the first thing here is that preparing for OT is really preparing you for a new career in an English-speaking workplace, right? We talked a lot about this before. We just mentioned kind of some of these clinical communication skills. So preparing for and taking OET is really setting you up for this new career in an English-speaking workplace. And it'll also give you the confidence that you need to be able to communicate with patients and colleagues from day one, right? So a lot of people that are maybe thinking about starting a new career in the United States or in another English-speaking country, that might be one of the things that they're most worried about, right? Will my colleagues, will the patients be able to understand me? So going through the process of preparing for OET and taking the test will really give you that confidence that you need to be able to communicate with others. The next thing here is that candidates have reported to us that they are more motivated to study for OET because the topics and questions are relevant and interesting to you as a healthcare professional, right? So we saw quite a few examples of what this relevant and specific content means. So that can give you an idea of why this would be of interest to you and why it would be a little bit more engaging for you as a healthcare professional. The other thing that I mentioned already is that we have both our paper and computer-based options. As a reminder, the computer-based option, you're doing the whole portion. You're doing the reading, writing, and listening at the venue, and then you're doing the speaking section at home over Zoom, over a secure version of Zoom. And then the paper-based test, you're doing the entire test at the venue, right? But for both of those options, there's only one visit to the venue necessary in order to finish the test. And then also we have a really growing network of test venues available, right? So currently we have over 1,000 venues in more than 90 countries. And this is a growing network. So you can always check our website for availability of testing. But yes, we're really working on increasing that network and increasing access of OET for candidates that are interested in this test.
That is awesome. One person asked a question that said, what if the patient, I'm assuming they mean the interlocutor, is talking too much for a question and you have other questions to ask? And I'm assuming to be an interlocutor, you have to go through a training.
Yes.
So they kind of have a script of their own that they try to keep to make sure you do most of the talking. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. The interlocutors go through a training process. So again, as I said, it's obviously important to listen to and engage with the patient, but you shouldn't be in a situation where they're dominating the conversation. These are trained individuals who are just there to help you kind of facilitate this conversation. And then, yes, the last thing here is some upcoming OET events that we have available for you. So you can find our YouTube page, our Facebook, and I believe also Instagram all have this same handle here, which is official OET. So you can check those resources to find information about upcoming events. So for this one, for example, we have a live Q&A with two of OET staff members. And the timing and the dates of those events are listed here. So we have Tuesday, April 18th, and we have the different time zones there, as well as Thursday, May 4th. So you can look at the time zones and find which one might be most convenient for you to attend. But I would definitely encourage you to check this out and get some other questions answered that you might have about OET.
This is awesome. I suggest for any of you who are watching on your phone, grab that, take a screenshot of that, tune into that. Lots of really great. Thank you, Tracy, for the lower third. For all of these great things that OET are going to put out there for everyone. Very, very, very exciting right there. So with Jack's help, I'm excited to announce that we are, OET, has elected to do some giveaways. And I am so excited for this. The OET will be giving away through Worldwide. So you gotta be a Worldwide nurse and a Worldwide candidate to accept these. We are giving away 20 OET pulses. Those are worth 30 Australian dollars a piece. And remember, the OET pulse is like a practice test. It helps to evaluate you. Any other information you want to throw out about the OET pulse, Jack?
Yeah, so it's like a 30-minute English language placement. It kind of assesses your current ability and kind of maybe your current level of preparedness to take the OET exam. So it kind of really gives you an idea of where your skills are at and maybe where you still have to go to be able to successfully pass the OET test.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. If you hear howling in the background, everybody, just another sign we are live. I have a Siberian Husky and he can open doors. So he decided to come in and make his own vocal appearance today. Sorry about that. He has a lot to say to me today. So I'm really, really excited for those 20 OET pulses. So in order to be eligible for that, we need you, because I don't care. This is going to go on all week. So we post we post this footage. We post this show on our Facebook channels and our YouTube channels. So even if you're not watching live, even if you are watching me at 3 o'clock in the morning while you're on break at the hospital and you're watching Jack, comment, tell us your name, where you're from, your case manager, and if you're an RN or a nurse aide. But we also, the OET offers an exam for medical lab technicians and technologists. They suggest that you take the pharmacy tech exam. So super, super excited to have that option for those med lab people out there. So if you're med lab and you're like, I don't know, this is a test for you, and they have a custom test for you. So super excited to offer that. Not only are we going to give away 20 OET Pulse exams, we are giving away, and OET has agreed to give away a free OET exam. And that is a 587 Australian dollar, equivalent of 390 US dollars. That's the value of that, a free OET exam. This is huge. No one else has done this for us, people. Again, why I'm such a huge fan of the OET. No one else has given us a free exam, like whole shebang exam. That's a huge savings for all of you, a huge savings for our nurses. The exam is only eligible for our RNs. So for our registered nurses, just because the RNs, it is required that they have to have a visa screen, and they have to have an English language exam to process that. Nurse aides don't have to have an exam. So I'm really, really, really excited. I'm so thankful to the OET, so thankful to Jack for this opportunity, for all the knowledge that you dropped on us today. Very excited. Tune in next week to see who wins the free OET exam, and we will be notifying those of you who have won an OET Pulse as well. So thank you so much, Jack. Do you have any final comments? Does anybody out there have any final questions for Jack? We have a nurse that's joining, says they just finished their evening shift. So in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So very excited to have all of those people with us today.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think this has been great being able to share more about the OET test with everyone on this call. And thank you again for the great questions. And like I said, I will get back to you. I wrote down the information about where spelling is counted and where it's not counted on the OET test. So I will get back in touch with you following up on that specific information as well to make sure that there's clarity around that.
I will share that information on the show next week for sure. Someone asked the difference between the OET and I think they mean the NCLEX. Yeah, the NCLEX is specific for, that's part of your licensure process, right? You have to take the NCLEX to be a licensed RN, which tune in next week because we're going to be talking about the new NCLEX exam that's rolling out, next gen NCLEX that'll be rolling out. Excited to talk about that next week. So the OET is an English exam, although healthcare driven and related. NCLEX is specific for nursing licensure. So again, someone asked how to win the free test. All you have to do is comment, give me your name. Are you an RN or a nurse aide? And tell me who your case manager is. So very, very, very excited. With all that being said, Jack, you're getting lots of praise over here in the chat. So many nurses and nurse aides saying thank you. You are such a massive help. We would love to have you on the show again to talk more about nurse aides or to talk more about the OET and the OET exam. So thank you, thank you, thank you, Jack. I'll give you just a second to say one final farewell, and then I'm going to wrap us up.
All right. Yes. Thank you again for everyone that participated. This has been really, really helpful and insightful to me. And I love hearing where everyone's from and kind of seeing your comments and the great types of questions that you have about OET. And yes, hopefully we can collaborate again, Kari, with a further session in the future with more details.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Jack. I appreciate you and your time. And then, ladies and gentlemen, that is going. I see so many of you now commenting. You're telling me who your awesome case managers are. All these wonderful things, all this wonderful information. Thank you so much. Keep commenting. You don't have to watch live to be eligible for this. You do not have to watch live to be eligible for this prize. Just matters that you watch the show. Give me your name. Are you an RN or a nurse aide? And tell me who your case manager is. And I am so excited about next week. I'm so excited to give away a free OET and 20 OET pulses. Remember, nurse aides, you are eligible for that OET pulse as well. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for stumbling into Kari's Corner. And just one more reminder, don't face the corner, face the world with Worldwide. Everyone have an awesome day, an awesome evening, and I'll see you guys next week. Over and out.